It was the email that tore my world apart. I sat at my desk, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I checked my inbox. Among the usual junk and work-related updates, there was an email from my former best friend, Jason. The subject line read, "I'm suing you." My heart stopped for a second as I clicked on it, the words in that email crashing into my brain like a freight train. He was accusing me of embezzling money from our shared business account. And not just a couple $100 either. The amount was in the six figures. My stomach twisted as I read it over again, trying to make sense of the madness. How could Jason, my best friend, the guy who had been like a brother to me for over 10 years, turn on me like this? It didn't make sense. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking. There was no way this was happening. I dialed Jason's number, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to hear it from him, to know if this was some kind of sick joke. It rang twice before he picked up. "Jason," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What the hell is this? You're suing me? What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end, a silence that felt too heavy, too final. Then he spoke, his voice cold and distant, something I hadn't heard from him in years. "You don't get it, do you?" Jason said, his words sharp, like he was already done with this conversation. "I gave you a chance to make it right, but you took advantage of me. You stole from me, and now you're going to pay the price." "Stole from you," I repeated, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. "Jason, I haven't taken a single cent. This is insane. You know me better than anyone. Why would I do that? You always had a way of hiding things, didn't you?" He shot back, a bitter edge in his tone. "You think I didn't notice? All those times you were too busy to check the books? Or how the numbers didn't add up? You thought you could pull the wool over my eyes, but I was watching. I knew something was wrong." I shook my head, disbelief settling in. "No, this isn't how things went down. You're confused, Jason. I never—" "Save it," he interrupted, his voice firm. "You'll see me in court." The call ended abruptly, and I just stood there, holding the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of the words hang in the air. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. How had it come to this? Why would Jason go this far? We had built our business together, side by side, for years. We had been through the highs and lows, the late nights, the stressful deadlines, the victories and the setbacks. He knew me better than anyone, and yet here he was accusing me of something that could ruin me. I stared at the screen of my phone, the harsh reality setting in. There was no way this was a mistake. Jason had been planning this for a while. But why? What had changed? What had I missed? The next few days were a blur. I called every lawyer I could find, trying to figure out how the hell I could defend myself against something I didn't even understand. But the answers I got only deepened the pit in my stomach. The lawsuit wasn't just a petty claim. Jason had already gone public with the accusation. He told people in the company, some of our mutual friends, even our families. And now, everyone was looking at me with suspicion. Everywhere I went, whispers followed me. People asked questions they had no right to ask. "Is it true?" they'd say, their voices low, but not low enough to hide the judgment in their eyes. My own family didn't know what to believe anymore. My mother asked me, with tears in her eyes, if I had done anything wrong, if I had taken anything from Jason. My brother even asked me if there was any chance I had done it without realizing, as if I had somehow made a mistake in managing the business. I was alone in all of this. The people I thought I could count on were now unsure. And Jason? He was playing the role of the wronged victim perfectly. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Jason was out to destroy me, and I had no idea why. But as I sat there, staring at the documents piled high on my desk, one question kept running through my mind. What the hell had happened between us? The days that followed were nothing short of a nightmare. I woke up every morning with a sense of dread that seemed to weigh me down even before I opened my eyes. It wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the way everyone around me, people I had trusted, worked with, laughed with, was starting to turn their backs. I hadn't expected this level of betrayal. I hadn't expected Jason to tear me apart like this. It wasn't until the second week that I realized how deep this rabbit hole went. I'd been sitting at home one night, trying to piece together the finances, when I got a call from Greg, one of our old partners. His tone was distant, almost cold, when he picked up the phone. "Hey, Greg." I said, trying to keep the anxiety from slipping into my voice. I need your help. Jason's accusing me of stealing from the business, and I know, Greg interrupted, his voice tight. I don't know what happened, man. He's been talking about you for days now. He's got everyone convinced that you've been skimming money off the top. He's got proof too, I guess. I don't know what to say. I froze. Proof? What proof? Greg, this is insane. I haven't done anything wrong. I've worked my ass off for this company. Look, man, I believe you, all right? But right now, everyone's just listening to Jason. He's got all the right connections, all the right words. It's hard to fight against that. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. Jason had the connections. Jason had the right words. And right now, I had nothing but confusion and a dwindling sense of hope. The next day, things got worse. I had a meeting scheduled with one of the lawyers, trying to get a strategy together for how to fight this. I had every intention of proving my innocence, but when I walked into the office, I saw a familiar face sitting across the table from the lawyer. It was Angela, one of Jason's closest friends. We'd all gone out together countless times, spent weekends in the mountains or at the beach, shared laughs and secrets. But here she was now, sitting across from me with her arms folded, an expression on her face I couldn't quite read. Angela, I said, my voice sounding more like a question than I wanted it to. What are you doing here? Angela didn't even look up at first, but then her eyes slowly lifted, meeting mine. They were colder than I'd ever seen them. Jason asked me to help, she said, her voice even almost businesslike. I'm his legal advisor now. The words hit me like a punch. What? You're helping him with this? You know me. You know I didn't do this. Why are you doing this? She sighed, leaning back in her chair. It's not personal, okay? I'm just doing my job. Jason's been through a lot with you, and he feels betrayed. You've always been so good at hiding things. Maybe it's time someone made sure the truth comes out. I shook my head in disbelief. So, you're just going to let him drag me through the mud? You're going to sit here and help him destroy me? She didn't flinch. I'm just doing my job. I stared at her for what felt like an eternity. It was as though I was looking at a stranger, someone I didn't know at all. This wasn't the Angela I had known, the one who had laughed at stupid jokes and talked for hours about everything and nothing. This was someone different, someone cold, calculating, willing to destroy someone who had once been her friend. I stormed out of the meeting, my head spinning, the air thick with anger and betrayal. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. Jason had already turned half the world against me, and now even the people I thought I could trust were slipping away. The more I tried to prove my innocence, the more they seemed to close in. It was as though the entire world was telling me that I was guilty, even without any proof. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced in circles, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, what had happened to turn my best friend into my worst enemy. I sat there in the dark, staring at the empty space beside me, where Jason's face had once been so familiar, so full of life. I wondered if I had missed something, some shift, some moment when he stopped being my friend and started plotting my downfall. It wasn't until a week later that the first clue came. I was digging through old records, trying to find any evidence that might support my innocence, when I stumbled across something that shouldn't have been there, a wire transfer slip. It was a large sum of money, just under the amount Jason was accusing me of taking, but it wasn't from the business account. It was a payment from one of Jason's other companies. I didn't recognize the name of the company at first, but when I looked up the details, I found out it was a shell company. Jason had set it up a year ago, and it was tied to several other offshore accounts. My heart skipped a beat. What was this? Why had Jason transferred money to a shell company? And why didn't I know about it? There were more questions than answers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the key to everything. Jason was hiding something, a secret he hadn't shared with me. Something big. I spent the next few days diving deeper into this new lead, contacting financial experts, trying to get to the bottom of what Jason had been up to. The more I dug, the more I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. Jason wasn't just accusing me of stealing money. He was hiding something far more sinister. This wasn't just a business dispute. This was personal. But the more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Jason wasn't going to let me walk away from this. And whatever he was hiding, he was willing to do whatever it took to keep me from finding out. I didn't sleep for days after that. Every moment was spent running through the financial records, tracing every transaction, trying to piece together what Jason had been doing behind my back. There was a pattern emerging, but it didn't make any sense. The transfers were frequent, spread across different accounts, and all seemed to point to one thing. Jason was funneling money away from the business, hiding it in places I couldn't touch. It wasn't just a few $100s or even a few thousand. The amounts were massive, enough to ruin everything we had built. And yet, I kept asking myself the same question. Why would he do this to me? What had happened to the guy who I had shared everything with for years? One evening, as I was going over a series of transactions from a bank statement, the phone rang. I looked down at the caller ID and froze. It was Greg. I hadn't heard from him since our last conversation. He hadn't answered my texts or calls after that, so I wasn't sure where we stood. I took a deep breath before answering. "Greg," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart was racing. "What's going on?" "Look, man, I've been thinking about this whole thing," Greg said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "And I can't just sit here and do nothing. I know Jason's been acting weird, but I didn't want to get involved. But after what you said about those wire transfers, I don't think he's being honest with you. I think there's more to this than just money." I sat up, a jolt of hope sparking through me. "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" "I've been looking into it," Greg continued. "I had a feeling there was something shady going on, but I didn't want to get caught in the middle of all this. But you're right. Jason's been hiding things. I don't think he's telling you the whole story. I think he's been setting you up." I felt my blood run cold. "Setting me up? For what?" "Look, I don't have all the details yet," Greg said quickly, "but I've got some information that might help. I'll send it to you. Just be careful. Jason's not the guy you think he is anymore. And whatever's going on, it's big." Before I could ask him anything else, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, the weight of his words sinking in. Jason was setting me up? What did that even mean? How could I have missed this? Greg had been one of the few people I could trust, and now even he was telling me to be careful. I spent the next few hours scrolling through my phone, reading over Greg's message again and again. He had sent me a folder with files, documents, and screenshots of some of the transactions I had already found, along with some others I hadn't. One of the files was a conversation between Jason and someone I didn't recognize. It was a series of texts, but they were enough to send a chill down my spine. The texts were coded in a way that made it hard to decipher, but the context was clear. Jason had been planning something for a while, and I was the target. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. Jason wasn't just accusing me of stealing money. He was framing me for it. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but I still didn't understand why. Why would Jason do this to me? Why go through all this trouble to ruin my life? I tried to make sense of it all, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't have all the answers. I needed to talk to Jason. I needed to confront him face to face and get to the bottom of this. But I knew it wasn't going to be easy. He had already made his move, and he wasn't going to back down. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding anymore. This was war. The next day I called him. My hands shook as I dialed his number, the tension in my chest almost unbearable. When Jason picked up, his voice was as cold and distant as it had been during our last conversation. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone clipped. "I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Face to face. You and me. No lawyers, no games. Just the truth." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he was going to hang up on me. But then, surprisingly, he agreed. "Fine. Meet me at the old place. The bar we used to go to, remember?" I didn't need to be told twice. The place was a dive, a hole-in-the-wall bar we used to hang out at when things were easier. It was the last place I wanted to meet Jason now, but I didn't care. I had to see him to get the answers I was so desperately searching for. When I arrived, I spotted Jason immediately. He was sitting at a booth in the back, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the room like he was waiting for someone. I walked up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to calm my nerves. When he saw me, he didn't say anything at first, just nodded as I sat down across from him. "So, you wanted the truth, huh?" Jason said, his voice strangely flat. "Well, here it is. You were never good enough for the business. You always held me back. You always played the victim, and I got tired of it. So I decided to take control. I was going to make it all work without you." I blinked, stunned. "What?" What the hell are you talking about? Jason leaned forward, his eyes hard and bitter. You didn't think I'd ever figure it out, did you? You thought you could just walk away with my money, leave me in the dust while you took all the credit. Well, I was smarter than that. I knew you'd screw me over eventually, so I made sure you would be the one to fall. Everything clicked into place then. The betrayal, the lies, the slow, calculated way Jason had been pushing me out of the business. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. Jason had always been obsessed with power, with having everything under his thumb, and now he was going to make sure I lost everything, even if it meant destroying me in the process. I had to make a choice then, let him win or fight back with everything I had. I sat there trying to absorb the weight of what Jason had just said. His words hung in the air between us, as cold and unforgiving as the beer-stained table we sat at. He had planned this all along. Every accusation, every lie, it was all a part of his grand design to take control of everything we had built. I wanted to lash out, to scream at him, but something inside me told me to stay calm. If I lost my cool, he would win. Jason had always been good at manipulating people, at making them lose their heads when it mattered the most. But I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. You're sick, you know that? I said, my voice steady but low. You've been planning this for who knows how long. And for what? So you could take everything from me? You think this is about the money, but it's not, is it? This is about your need to control everything around you. Jason didn't flinch. He just leaned back in his seat, his hands clasped in front of him like he was holding all the cards. You've always been weak, man, Jason said, his voice flat. You were always the one who couldn't handle the pressure, the one who needed me to pick up the pieces. I carried us both for years, and now it's time for me to finally take what's mine. I stared at him, trying to process everything. I had known Jason was competitive, had known he had a drive to be the best, but this was different. This was betrayal on a level I hadn't thought him capable of. He was willing to burn everything down just to prove a point, to make sure he got what he thought was owed to him. You really don't get it, do you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You're not going to win. You've already lost. Jason's smirk faltered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. What are you talking about? I've already got everything I need, I said, watching his eyes narrow. You've been so focused on making me the villain, you didn't stop to think about the consequences of what you were doing. Those wire transfers you were so careful to hide? I've got proof of everything. Every move you made, every illegal account, every shady deal you set up. You're done, Jason. For the first time, I saw something resembling fear flash in his eyes. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think I won't ruin you, don't you? You think you could just walk away from this? I'm not walking away from anything, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I'm going to expose you for what you are, nothing more than a fraud. Jason's expression hardened. You don't have the guts. You're too weak to take me down. Watch me, I said, standing up. I didn't give him another look as I turned and walked out of the bar, every step heavy with the realization that I was finally done with this. Done with the lies, done with the manipulation, and most importantly, done with him. I didn't go home that night. I had made up my mind, and I wasn't going to let fear stop me. I had spent too long running, too long trying to make things right with Jason. Now, it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I called Greg as soon as I got to my car, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Greg, I need you to get me everything you've got on Jason, I said, my voice steady. I need it all, any documents, any proof that links him to anything illegal. This ends now. There was a brief pause on the other end. Are you sure about this? Greg asked, his voice cautious. You're really going up against him? I don't have a choice anymore, I said, taking a deep breath. He's been setting me up, and if I don't do something, he's going to destroy me. I can't let him win. Greg didn't argue. All right, I'll send you everything I've got, but you need to be careful. Jason's not just going to sit back and let this happen. He's got people watching. I know, I said, my grip tightening on the steering wheel, but I'm done running. I'm going to bring him down, no matter what it takes. I drove through the night, the weight of my decision settling into my chest like a heavy stone. When I finally got home, the first thing I did was sit down at my computer and pull up all the evidence I had. Every document, every transaction, every message. I had it all laid out in front of me. But I knew I couldn't just send it to a lawyer and hope for the best. This was going to take more than that. This was going to take strategy. This was going to take everything I had left. I knew I had one shot to make this work. I had to hit Jason where it hurt the most, and that meant exposing everything. The next day, I reached out to a journalist I knew, someone who had covered corporate scandals before. I wasn't sure if he would bite, but I had to try. If I could get the media involved, if I could get the truth out there before Jason could do any more damage, maybe I could still win this. The journalist agreed to meet me. We sat down in a quiet cafe, and I handed over everything I had. He looked through the documents, his eyes widening as he pieced together what I had. "This is big," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're sure about this? You want to go public with all this?" "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice resolute. "If I don't, Jason will win, and I'm not going to let that happen." He nodded, understanding the weight of what I was asking. "All right, I'll make some calls. This is going to take a while, but we'll get this out there." As I walked out of the cafe, my heart was pounding in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control again. Jason thought he had me cornered, but he had no idea what was coming. The game had changed. Now it was my turn to play. The days after I met with the journalist passed in a blur. I kept my head down, knowing that I had set something in motion that was too big to undo. Jason was a dangerous person when he felt threatened, and I had no doubt that he would fight back with everything he had. The pressure of the whole situation weighed on me, but there was a part of me that had never felt more alive. I had finally stopped being passive in my own life. For the first time, I was taking control. 2 weeks after I handed over the evidence, the first article hit the newsstands. It wasn't just a small blurb or an obscure story. It was front-page news. The journalist had done a hell of a job connecting the dots between the illegal transactions, Jason's shady business dealings, and the growing number of witnesses who had come forward about his actions. The piece was comprehensive, and it left nothing to question. Jason's face was plastered all over the front page,